Welcome to the Uncredible Podcast. My name's Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. This week has been pretty crazy. 2 weeks out from the Buffalo Marathon for me. Actually, right now, the week started 2 weeks out. Now it's Saturday morning, so I am 8 days away from the Buffalo Marathon. So, it's been a hectic week. We're going to talk about that in our main topic a little bit later. But first, let's get into the Substack and what's going to be going on next week. So our first article next week is called, How Are You Bagging Your Groceries? And, I noticed this week, and I've mentioned this before, but there are things that happen in the world that I don't understand. As I get older, I'm noticing how I think when you're younger, you are more concerned about what you're doing. You're very focused on yourself. And as you get older, you become more confident in yourself. You become more established or maybe set in your ways is a way of putting it. But you've kind of come to conclusions on what's the right way to do things, the wrong way to do things. Whether they're right or wrong doesn't matter. You've just kind of established that. And then you start looking around at how other people behave and how they act in society. And I'm telling you, I don't know what it is, but I'm noticing just very strange things. This article, How Are You Bagging Your Groceries? So during COVID, this whole phenomenon of the self-checkout kind of took flight. We were kind of forced into, at least where I'm from, I'm in the state of New York, and we were kind of forced into doing this thing where we have to do our own groceries. And it has really revealed, I don't know if it's a process thing or how people break down problems and then tackle, they come up with solutions to problems. But it's I'm a very step by step. I like to think I'm objective. I like to look at things, plan them out, figure out the steps, and try to come up with the most efficient way to do things. And this article, I noticed the other day. So the place where I shop, it's always going to be Walmart. Sorry, Walmart, but that's where we shop the most here. They have this weird checkout situation where there's 4 checkouts, but they're side by side. So it's 8 full checkouts, and it's kind of like a free for all where there's no lines. It's sort of like this square area where there are 2 registers on either side, and then everybody who's kind of going to those registers is trying to figure out what's next. And there's these green lights. So this is supposed to help you understand when a register is ready, so you're not just standing there. Because people, when there's 8 registers being, people checking out at 8 different registers, and then we'll say 5 or 10 people kind of looking around, who's next? There's no line. What? It's kind of like banker's rules, except without the little chain to guide you so that we know who's next in line. It's just a free for all. It's wild. And so above each register, when you process your transaction, you swipe your card, you print your receipt, there's a light above the register that indicates that you're done with your transaction. But what I've noticed is that green light. So if you're standing there and you've been waiting for a while and there's a whole bunch of people who are doing large orders, they're, whole carts and all this kind of thing, you're kind of getting impatient. You're waiting for your turn. And it's the green light comes on and you're yes, it's my turn, right? And then you start to go and you realize that individual, even though they've run their credit card and the transaction's complete, you realize they haven't bagged their groceries. So this article explores this decision, I guess it's a decision, to scan every single item first and then bag, as opposed to what I believe would be the more efficient way to handle it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can get in the comments and tell me how wrong I am about this, or explain to me the logic of waiting till after to bag. But so they've scanned all their items, they run their transactions, and all their stuff is just sort of sitting there. Okay. And some people will throw it back into the cart. Some people have different ways of handling that process. But when they don't bag it, that green light comes on and they are still 5 minutes away. Because the other thing I've noticed is people don't know how to bag their groceries. And it's sort of I guess I take for granted the fact that I was, my first job was a grocer, like a bagger, like at a grocery store, Hy-Vee in Iowa. In fact, I ran into somebody on Instagram this week who mentioned Hy-Vee. I didn't even know that chain was still active. And he posted a picture and I was like, fun fact, that was my first job when I was 15. And he was like, oh, you lived in Iowa. So it's like being somebody who bagged groceries as my first job, it's always stuck with me, like basic things like the eggs go on top, right? You don't throw the eggs in and then throw like a 6-pack of soda on top of it because you'll smash the eggs, or the bread. Like there's certain things like that. And then another thing is like the colds go together. And so like when I'm bagging my groceries, I'm very specific about how I do it. And like I build a base, like a firm base of solid things. Like I'll put heavy things on the bottom and just build it up. And like as I'm shopping, this is how strategic I am about it. As I'm shopping and knowing that I'm going to self-checkout, I arrange my cart in such a way so that when I check out, the things are basically in order so that I can bag them as I go. And so when I scan an item, I put it in I bag it then, so that by the time I take my transaction or run my transaction, credit card, cash, whatever it is, I'm done. I just throw the bags in the cart and we go. But there are people who literally just scan everything, pile it up, and then take an additional step of bagging it. Now, what's interesting to me is if you've ever gone to like Aldi, where they have like a bagging station, I can understand that because it's almost like, I mean, I still don't understand it because even they have like a bagging section. But I remember back in the day with Aldi, when that's what it was. They didn't bag your groceries. So at Aldi, back before we had self-checkouts, the person checking you out would just have another cart sitting there, and they would take your stuff, throw it into another cart, and then you would head over and bag your own groceries. So they had this like countertop. So in that situation, I kind of understand it, but there's really no reason, if you're doing self-checkout, that I can figure out to scan everything first and then bag later. I can't wrap my mind around that unless you're going to scan it, pile it up, and then throw it in your cart and not bag it. I guess that would be somewhat fast. But if somebody can explain to me the efficiency or lack of efficiency or what I'm missing with this whole bagging groceries, like when you go through the self-checkout, what's your process? What I genuinely believe is the things that I notice. Another one I noticed the other day, it was so funny. I'm kind of a jerk for this. So people just walking in any entrance, not recognizing that there's an enter and an exit, like not realizing that. And so I was leaving. I was walking out what is clearly marked as the exit, and two people came walking in the exit. And I literally, like, normally when I'm patient, I have a cold. I'll talk about my cold and how crazy this week has been. It was towards the end of this week. I was frustrated. And it was one of those things where I'm like, God, do they not know what the entrance is? Like, is it? And so normally I would just sort of like be frustrated in my head and then swing around them. But I just kept going straight at them, and I kind of gave them like a death stare. Like, bro, you're going in the wrong door. Like, it's clearly marked. Now, does it matter? No, but it is marked. And it makes me wonder, like, why do you insist on doing the opposite of what is clearly marked on the sign? So all that to say this, I think what the truth is I'm overly worried about things that don't matter. And most of these people are just like, who cares? They're not thinking about it. I think that's a little selfish because I believe that the reason I do what I do is so that the next person in line can have a quick, there's not, I don't know if maybe these people have never been in this situation where they're trying to get out of Walmart as fast as possible. The green light comes on and then that person still has to bag their groceries. So it's like, ugh. So anyway, so next Wednesday, hopefully next Wednesday, how are you bagging your groceries? So that'll be a fun little article. Leave in the comments what you think about my process and what your process is. And then next Thursday, hopefully, we have another throwback article called Start Calling Your Posts Articles. Now, this week, because of how hectic it's been and just how sick I've been, my work schedule's been a mess. I actually haven't posted this week's throwback article, and I was a day late on the new article. What the reason for that is, excuse me, the reason for that is, I have the articles written, but I still have to record them. And this cold set in like Tuesday, like that's when I basically lost, anything above like a really deep voice, anything above that, I would just go to a whisper. And so I decided not to record the articles. I'm in this weird place right now where I want things that I produce to be professional, but I'm also very aware of the fact that the brand is Uncredible. So it doesn't matter. Like, we can just screw up in it, but I don't want to treat it that way. I want to do a good job, the best that I can. So, but I thought it would be weird if you were listening to the Uncredible readings on Spotify and you get to this point and you're listening to the articles, because they're short. So you could probably listen through all of them in like a run, like a single run. And you have them playing and you get to this one and my voice drops and I'm just like talking with a cold. I didn't want that to be that obvious. So this week's throwback article will probably post middle of the week next week. Maybe I'll do like a Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. It doesn't matter. Not too many people are just at the edge of their seat waiting for these articles to drop. So, but next week's actual throwback article is called Start Calling Your Posts Articles. And this, I debated whether or not to post this. I think it's good for the Substack community. I originally wrote this towards the end of my time on working with medium.com. I was trying to reach the people of me, like reach the audience that was Medium. And that was kind of about the time that I was like, I don't want to write about writing. But the whole reason I left medium.com is because once you're in that ecosystem, it's like the majority of the people are writers who write about how to write. And I was like, I don't want to, it's not what I want to do. I don't want to write about writing. And so this was like my attempt to kind of enter into that space and reach those people. And then I was like, after writing this article, I was like, that's not really what I'm interested in, but it's an important article. It talks about valuing your writing, valuing the things you produce. And like, if you write a blog, for example, you're spending time on that. And blog or blog post just kind of carries with it sort of I'm not sure what the term would be, but it just, when you say, I have a new article, right? That's like, oh, this person wrote an article, has sort of professionalism to it. When you say, ooh, new blog post up, people are like, journal entry, right? Like, it doesn't carry with it the same sort of weight. And so it's just my encouragement to people when they post stuff to treat it as valuable as it is. When you put your time and your energy into something and you do a good job, treat it that way. Call it that. When you want to share it online, tell people, give it the terms that elevate it. Don't knock your own material down, because generally I would assume that people don't want to just enter into new information anyway. And then if the author or the creator is already kind of like taking shots at it, doesn't really help. And this is coming from a guy who literally calls himself Uncredible. So I guess that's sort of hypocritical, but anyway, next week, how are you bagging your groceries, and start calling your posts articles. And because I mentioned it, I'll mention it again. On Spotify, if you want to just listen to all my articles, I'm closing in on, I would say by, I'm trying to do the math on this, I think we're around 70. So I would say by the middle of the summer, we should be about 100 articles, audio recordings of articles read by me on the Uncredible Readings podcast. I don't treat it like a podcast. If you go to that, it's sort of like if you like to listen to audiobooks, but you don't want that much stuff to listen to. I don't know if you've ever listened to an audiobook that was like super long. This is sort of like a middle ground for you. So it's my articles just read. My idea is that you could binge it on a run, you could binge it on a bus ride or whatever, or you could scroll through and find ones that you like. And also, if you go to the Substack at uncredible.me, when you're on, like if you're using the app, there's a play button. Now, you have the option as an author to just pick an AI voice. I'm intentionally going through the process of recording those articles for two reasons. One, I think my voice matters to be connected to it. And two, it helps me get in the process of doing the recording of the podcast, and it just gets me more comfortable with the whole recording process. So the editing, the recording, and all that. So it just keeps that muscle strong. So check it out on Spotify. It's Uncredible Readings. And then obviously if you go to uncredible.me, sign up for the Substack, totally free. You'll get all the articles, all the podcasts dropped into your email. The podcast drops in with a link to the the Spotify or the YouTube. Those are the primary places we're posting everything. So check those things out. Let's go ahead and jump into our weekly update. And man, I'll tell you, the Buffalo Marathon, it is coming up quick. Like, it is coming up quick. And it feels like 5 weeks ago, I was working through muscle pain and difficulty, fighting these thoughts of like, I don't know if I can do a marathon. I don't know if I'm injured, to now it's next week. I mean, it's literally like next week, I'll be heading out to Buffalo to get my bib a week from now. It's crazy to think about. But yeah, Buffalo Marathon is Sunday, May 24th. By the way, it's kind of weird also how Memorial Day is falling this year. Like, it's not the last week of May. So that's kind of weird. But yeah, May 24th, I'm going to try to treat the Buffalo Marathon just like any one of my runs. I'm going to post the same way I do on Instagram and on Strava. By the way, if you're not following me on Strava, you can find me there too. It's all the same information. Jeremy Lundmark is pretty much the tag for all of it, the username. So if you're a runner and you like to follow, give kudos and all that stuff, check that out. Later in the year, when we get closer to like October, November, I'll probably be pushing the Winter Beast Challenge again. So hop on Strava, friend me. I'll follow you back. I don't have any qualms about that. I'm not worried about that. I like getting more people on there, especially if you're a runner. So check it out. But yeah, Buffalo's coming up. And before I get into this last week's runs and where I'm at with myself physically, I wanted to point out something that I've been struggling with. I think struggling with it's the right word. It's the same struggle I had when I think it was when I did my Winter Beast Challenge. Yeah. It might have been Presque Isle last year in Erie. One of my two last races, I really struggled with. I think it was Erie, because I struggled with whether or not to wear my water vest. And I wore it, but during all my training runs for my last marathon, which was in September of last year, I wear a water vest with like 3 liters of water. I end up putting like 2.5. I don't fill it completely. And then I have 2 water bottles, 2 like soft water bottles. And the water vest is sort of a 50-50 kind of a thing. It's nice to have water on demand. Technically, yes, you can skip the water stations. In theory, I guess that would be quicker. But then you look at the reality of elite runners don't do that. So, and one of the struggles that I've had on my long runs is finding water. Like I get dry mouth, the back of my throat gets dried out, and I like to have water on me at all times. However, I also need to leverage the water station. So at Presque Isle, I was kind of 50-50. I almost left the water vest behind. And what I ended up doing was I left the water bladder behind and only took my two soft water bottles. And the whole thought for that one was weight. So do I want to carry this extra weight? And the answer was no. And I was relying on the water stations to basically do what the water bladder would do. So now I'm sort of debating that question again. And the challenge now at my Rochester half marathon, the Winter Beast or the Winter Warrior half marathon in Rochester in January, I did the same thing. I wore the water vest with the 2 water bottles and did not even touch a water station. They had it set up to where you did 4 loops. And so I guess those would have been like 3 mile loops, give or take for that. Is that right? 3, little over 3 mile loops. I ended up skipping all the water stations and just using my 2 bottles. So what that tells you is I can get through a half marathon with the 2 bottles relatively comfortably in 22-degree weather. This is going to be a little bit different. I don't think it's going to be too hot for this. However, as I was reading through the Buffalo Marathon, things you can and can't bring, a backpack was listed as something you couldn't bring, and a water vest was not listed either direction. And so I'm like, like, first of all, I'm not really sure I want to wear the water vest at all. I kind of want to get away from it because nobody else wears them. I want to rely on the water stations. But then I started to go through the route. They have an interactive map where you can see where the water stations are. And the water stations are pretty far apart for the first half of the marathon. So after mile 13, I think it is, or maybe at mile 13, there's a water station every mile. However, leading up to that, there's actually one stretch that's 4 miles that doesn't have a water station. And I'm like, and it's like 6 miles, 6 to 10, or it's pretty far into it. And I'm like, I don't know if I like that either. So I'm reading through these instructions, and I'm like, they're kind of implying that I can't bring a water vest. I'm not sure that they're saying that, but they're kind of implying it. A belt is allowed for fuel. And so what I did was I ordered a cheap belt that I can throw my gels in, and it comes with water bottles attached, 2 little small bottles. And I'm like, that's about the best way that I can guarantee that I have like at least a splash of water if my throat dries out, and something to go with the gels, because the gels that I'm using, I'm just using goo and just GU. Those gels are pretty thick, and it's nice to have like a rinse real quick after you take them. So, and I'm going to be taking those about every 2 miles, like 2.5 miles, give or take. So I can't go 4 miles. It would be 2 gels without water. I just can't do it. So I bought this vest. I bought this belt that has 2 water bottles. We're going to try that out. They always say don't do anything new on race day, but I have to come up with something to where I start reducing the amount of water that I need to consume on these races. Now, you obviously want to play it safe, especially when it's really hot. But based on the weather right now, it looks like it's going to be high 40s, low 50s to start. And I plan to be done by 10:30. So race starts at 6:30. I'm shooting for a sub 4 hours, which might go a little longer. But worst case scenario, unless I get I'm limping, would be like 11 o'clock. So the sun towards the end will be up, but then we have water stations to rely on. So yeah, I'm kind of working through that. Would love to hear what you're doing. Like if you're a runner, how do you manage? I've been watching different runners talk about their fueling, and then I see them cross the finish line with nothing in their hands, no belt. Maybe it's under their shirt and their shirt's not tucked in. I don't know, but I'm like, where did you put all that? Like my plan is to bring 12 gels. I'm pretty sure I can fit those in the belt that I bought, and I have a second belt that I might wear. We'll see. But just the gels alone, it's like, where are you putting these things? Like, holy crap. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about fueling at the end of this, but this last week was the beginning of a 2-week taper for me. And as you know, I've been struggling with some right side leg pain. That has pretty much, let me put it this way. Before I tapered this week, and by taper, I mean, I went from running 28 to 32 miles down to, I will probably be right around 18. So a little, like about 40% I cut. I don't know math on that. But I cut the running down, and I have no marathon pace miles. So I'm really dialing it back. I'm looking at my notes right now. Every run was easy. My last long run was last Sunday, and I did this with fueling. And I got to tell you, I felt really good. And this was before I tapered. I felt really good. My leg was a little sore, but I pushed through it. And what I noticed during that long run, and it's funny, I've been doing this. The Buffalo Marathon next week will be my 1-year anniversary of running races. So last year, I ran my first 5K. So this upcoming Sunday, not this week, but the following Sunday, May 24th, will be my 1-year anniversary. I'll be running my second marathon. And I'm just noticing this now, that my body, how do I describe this? My body sends me signals during runs that I've been ignoring for a while. And I need to listen more, because I had a long run 2 weeks ago where I didn't fuel at all. I was trying to go easy, and everything fell apart at like mile 9. And I say everything fell apart. I had to walk, couldn't breathe, leg was hurting, throbbing, whatever. So I took gels and some other random stuff with me on this past Sunday's run. And I realized, first of all, that like when I get really dry in my mouth, my body's not necessarily telling me I need water. It's telling me to slow down. And that sounds crazy, but when I did that, now here's how I figured it out. I was almost every time I start my run, the first quarter to half mile, my heart rate on my watch anyway says it's really high, and I get really out of breath. And I always try to back it off at that point and let everything settle into play. And then after about 2 miles, we're in a groove and I can just go. And immediately, normally I push through that, and I go, like, it starts at like a quarter mile and I go to the half mile. And in my route, that's about 4 or 5 blocks. And I get to the crest of this like little hill. And then I kind of relax when I go down it. And I thought to myself, when it started happening, this last long run, I was like, don't, like, you already feel it. Like, your heart rate is up. You're already getting that dry mouth. Just slow down. This is like I told myself, this is supposed to be an easy run. So I did an easy run. And I'm telling you, I did that 13 miles as easy as I could and still like thinking about my pace. Didn't look at the watch hardly at all. And I think it was like a 9:40? It was like a 9:40 pace. And I'm like, my goal for the marathon is 9 minutes, like 9 minutes and 5 seconds. I don't know what it averages out to get sub 4. I think it's like 9:10, somewhere in there. But I'm only like 30 seconds off when I'm just chilling. Like I was really just chilling. And I'm like, if I can do the first half marathon with like a 9:40 pace, not ideal when I'm chasing that 4 hours, but it's going to get me close. I mean, I felt great when it was done. And the only thing that I regret is I didn't have one more gel to take to see how I felt with that last gel. But it was only supposed to be a half marathon anyway. So it really taught me a lot. And then the other side of it was at about mile 2, because I've been trying to decide when should I be taking these gels. And I always wait till like mile 3, 3.5, 4 to take the first gel. And a few weeks ago, I tried taking a gel right before. And that helped. But then in my head, I was like, oh, I should be able to go longer before I take the next one. So I was like 2 miles in to this long run. And something convinced me. So my legs started hurting. Like I started to feel pain in my shin and my hip. And I was like, man, this is not going to be good for the marathon. And I was like, you know what? The logic or the science behind taking the gels is to not only fuel you, but to give your body the energy it needs. And one of the places where you lose energy is your legs. So I'm not a scientist. I'm not a nutritionist, none of that. I just was like, these are things that I've heard. Excuse me. And I was like, take the gel now. And I'm telling you, I took that gel and I was in it. The pain, I'm not, that sounds kind of like a Pentecostal revival. Like the pain went away. No, but it like immediately I could feel that was like my body was telling me, hey, you need to get something in you to continue what you're doing. And I was like, yo, that's a huge deal, because they always say with fueling, you want to fuel early and often. But like, if you're me, you're Uncredible like me, you're buying these things and you don't necessarily want to waste them either. So, so doing that, I ended up I had 3 gels and a waffle or something. And they were all gone by mile 8, but I felt great. Like I felt comfortable. And for the first time, my goal is not just a 3 hour and 55 marathon. It's a controlled 3 hour and 55. So what that means is I'm not killing myself to do it. I want to be in control this whole race of, I don't want to be panicking. I don't want to be struggling. I don't want to be like, I don't want to get to the end of this race and not be able to walk. Now, obviously there's going to be leg pain, soreness, whatever. I want to be able to do it with control. And if I can do that, then I believe that I can forward that momentum into the next marathon and start trying to get a little faster if I want to. Not really big on that, but if I get that sub 4 or somewhere near it and I feel good, then I feel like I can build on that. So that's the whole goal. But yeah, these are basically my takeaway from this first week of taper is my easy pace is going to land me right around 940. And if I gel and fuel and hydrate properly every 2.5 miles, I should be able to just cruise, and it'll be like in 4 hours and 20 minutes. And that would just be like taking it easy. Now, obviously, I'm going to try to push a little harder than that, but not too much harder. And I'm going to try to listen to my body. But that was the other thing that I learned was my body is sending signals to my brain. And I'm starting to finally, after like a year, recognize those signals as needs to be met. And so, for example, when I'm like, dry mouth, getting really tired and heavy breathing, it's like, back it off just a little bit. Breathe, basics. Get your rhythm back. And so it's like, instead of trying to push through that, I'm trying to listen to it and let my body regulate from there. So probably, I would have to say, probably the most effective taper that I've had. And in the past, I've hated tapering because I just like to keep running. But this one feels like it's working. And I will say that I'm glad I'm doing 2 weeks because the way things played out, I got sick, as you can hear, I'm coughing. But also, I can tell that my legs are almost back to full strength. And what I mean by that is when I go out on these easy, like 2-mile runs, it's there, but it's not bad. And it goes away immediately. So I'm not fighting with it. And I know if I give it another week of what I'm doing right now, I'll be in really, really good shape. All right, that covers our full week of running. Now let's get into the news and get an uncredible take on what's been going on. I'm in this weird place. I don't know if you remember, if you go back past episodes, I didn't really want to talk about the news because it reminds me of a podcast I did 10 years ago where I did like religious commentary on what was going on, and I got very heavy into politics. I'm just not that interested in it anymore. And there's tons of people who do that kind of content. I just don't want to be part of it. But at the same time, I do think there's a place for an uncredible take on what's going on in the news. And the news cycle right now, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like, you could pick anything, and it's literally head scratching. And I'm not sure if that's all due to Donald Trump or this whole administration just appearing to be, you know what it is? I think administrations in the past have been equally as incompetent, but better at communicating it subtly. Trump, this isn't even the topic, but Trump is on Truth Social. Every time I see a Truth Social post, I'm like, that can't be real. And then it turns out, and then I'll listen to like a podcast where it's like, Trump tweets this, or tweets, whatever. What do they call it? Truthing? I don't know what they call it. But Trump posts this on Truth Social, and it's like, bro. And this is sort of a side take. He does this thing where at the end of his posts, they're essentially tweets, he says, "Thank you for your attention to this matter." Like, first of all, no. Like, do people still write that in letters, like in emails, let alone on social posts? It's so weird. It's so weird. And I don't understand why he does that. But on top of that, you've got news stories breaking all the time about crazy things he's saying. And I mean, has a conflict ever been wrapped up so many times and still not been wrapped up? I mean, that right now, if I'm looking at the whole Iran thing, it's like, has a conflict, an overseas conflict, a military conflict, anything like that, has any leader ever come out and just said repeatedly, it's over, but it's not over, more than what we've been doing with this particular one? It's wild to me. The whole news cycle is just crazy. However, one of the things I like to share for this in the news uncredible take is when I find what I believe to be propaganda points being spread through different media outlets. And I picked up on one that I've heard so many times, and it's not only with this war. I've heard it in the past too. Like, I think during the Iraq war, maybe as far back as the war in the early 90s, the Desert Storm War. I can't remember. I would have been too young to really remember that. But thinking back on the history of it, I feel like even then it was said. But I heard it on a podcast. I don't know, what podcast was it? Might have been Piers Morgan. It might have been Dave Smith. Might have been Rogan. I don't know. It might have been one of those. But they talked about how, I think it was Rogan. You know what it was? Dave Smith on one of his recent podcasts was sharing clips of Rogan, and Rogan said it. And they described Iran in the 79, I think is the date, but in the 70s. And the way they describe Iran and describe how it's better, or how it was better, is they say, remember how free the country was? And they always say this: women on beaches and women in skirts. And I'm like, I understand that one of the big problems with Islam, with these regimes, I just, the propaganda thing, I just use the word regime, but is the oppression of women. That's kind of like one of the things we hold up as a major negative. But for some reason, hearing it this time, it sounded creepy. I was like, why is that? It wasn't coupled with anything else. Maybe that's what it was. It was not, it's like, oh, you had financial stability, you had wealth, and, women were free. It wasn't like coupled, women were free to dress how they wanted. It was just that. We've all seen, this is how it was said. It was something like, we've all seen pictures of Iran back in the 70s where women were in skirts. I'm going, that's a weird way of putting it. Like, is that the definition of better? Like, I get what he was saying, but then the more I thought about it, I was like, yo, like, I've heard that a lot. And so, out of curiosity, because I've heard it so much that I've never actually looked it up, so I typed it into Google. Iran, pictures of Iran before 1979 or something like that. And a bunch of pictures come up. Probably the common ones. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure what they're referring to versus what I was seeing. But then I did, I Google searched Iran after 1980. And it goes from people smiling to dark, like awful things. And I'm not I'm not disputing those images, but what I was like, the Google images matched that propaganda point. And I'm not saying one way or another. I guess by using the word propaganda, I guess I am kind of implying that it's not true. But what I mean to say is that it becomes more hard to believe. And it was like when you Google, I saw this, I think it was this week, when you Google satellites, you don't see any real images. They're all like AI or portrait, like drawings of satellites. But it just struck me as, like, you get one clear set of images if you type in pictures of Iran. Like, if I did pictures of Iran in the 70s, in the 80s, or 70s, 60s, 50s, I get the same kind of photos. And then if I did 80s and forward, I kind of get the same photos. And I was like, you would think that if I did, like, Iran in the, I'm kind of questioning myself because I did this very quickly and I probably could have done a more detailed research. But hey, this is Uncredible. You can prove me wrong. Leave a comment. But I was like, there's this really weird set of photos that is there. And then I get to thinking about what was going on and this whole conversation. I mean, one of the key propaganda points right now is that we've been at war with Iran for 40 some years. They've been at war with us for 40 some years. We're just now fighting back or something like that. That's kind of how, they're trying to pitch it. And I'm like, well, the propaganda war could have been going on this whole time. Like, I wasn't convinced by this Google search that I was really getting. It just felt like I was getting what was allowed. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading into it. But it got me thinking, like, how can we be sure of anything about another country? I used to think this about North Korea. Or is it South Korea? I get them mixed up. But they say North Korea has no internet. It's this awful place to live. Sure, Maybe it is, maybe it is. I have no way of knowing that. Like, it's interesting because, like, if we were in North Korea, would we know? Like if our internet was scrubbed and our news was scrubbed, which it appears to be on some level, would we know? Like, if there were groups of people only allowing certain types of media, would we know that? And would we be aware of it? Or would we just believe them and trust what they're saying? Like, it just got me thinking, like, how do I know that that's how it was in Iran in the 1970s? Because of like a handful of photos? You know, I don't know that. It may be true. There may be books and reports and et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that. And I was like, it would be very easy to, especially nowadays, to fabricate photos like that and that storyline and that propaganda point. It'd be easy to push that, especially back then when the media was so kind of relegated to like 3 major news stations. Like, you kind of were funneled to certain news stories. And then it would be even easier in today's technology to make it look like, when you look back at that point in history, that that's all there was. So it's like, it makes it very difficult to know with any certainty whether or not any of this is true at all. And then this is what's being used for the justification of the war. So it's like, or I keep calling it a war, and I struggle with, because I feel like calling what's going on with Iran a war is somewhat dubious, because it's technically a conflict, despite the fact everyone calls it a war. It's not been declared a war, so that's also weird. But what's striking to me about this one phrase about what the women looked like in the 70s is that it's used somehow as a trope to justify the war, the conflict, and say this is good for the people. And that singular point, which I guess what they're referring to is freedom for women. I guess that's what they're referring to. Okay. But the way they phrase it is kind of objectifying. And that's just coming from somebody who's just looking on as an observer. And maybe because we've just grown so used to that comment or that line of argumentation, when people say it, they take it at face value as that's what it means. But I just remember listening to this week going, that's kind of a weird way to put it. That's weird. It's kind of objectifying. And is that better? I'm not sure about that. So I get what they're saying. It seems like a weird propaganda point, and it was kind of disturbing to me, actually, when I heard it. And then I got to thinking about how many times I've heard it, and it never triggered anything in my head. But this time it did, and I was like, man, these phrases get said repeatedly, and we just accept them at face value. We just take it. And, you know, it's currently being used as a justification of the war to get them back to where they were in the 70s. And it's like, man, if you said that in America, we would go, we don't want to go back to the 70s. And we would then list off all the horrible things that were going on back then. So it's like we're being told right now that we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And the people of Iran want us to go to war with them to liberate them and get them back to the 70s. That's kind of like the way the line of reasoning works. And I'm like, we have no way of knowing if that's true. And also, like, even if it's true that they don't like their government, do they want another government bombing the crap out of them to fix it? You know, like right now, or well, we can go flip both ways, but like you could, if China during COVID decided that they wanted to liberate the United States of America from the evil lefties, we'll call it a regime, right? And they told their country, they told the Chinese, they said, hey, they're under lockdowns, they're forced to wear masks, men and women alike are forced to cover their faces in public. People have to get inoculated in order to have jobs. Like, if you could really sell that to a people and go, we have to liberate them. Like, and even Republicans at the time who were opposed to all of those mandates, libertarians as well, if China was like, we're going to come liberate you now, there's not an American in the world. There's not an America in the U.S. who wouldn't have joined hands with a Democrat, Republicans, Democrats, libertarians alike, and said, no, you're not going to bomb us, right? Like, You're not going to kill our president. You're not going to bomb, our state legislatures and leaders in Congress. You're not going to like attack our leaders. And yet that's what we're doing under the guise of trying to liberate a country. It's just like, wow. And then, so at the end of it, I look at that phrase and some of the things were being sold. And my uncredible take is, from COVID and other things, but COVID's the most recent example, we know the government is willing to use propaganda to gain support for whatever they're doing. My suggestion is to be skeptical and listen widely to various positions on anything and form your own opinion. And be very aware, I didn't have this in my notes, but be very aware of when you hear across multiple media platforms the same phrases, terms, and illustrations being used. Be aware of that, because that's when you start to key in on what might not be true, what's just being pushed rather than believed truly by the person. Like you heard me already in this episode say regime and then check myself, because that's not a word I use, but I'm using it in this context because that's what everyone else is saying. So, be aware of these. I think it's propaganda. That's the best way I can put it. But be aware of when a podcast, CNN, and Fox all use the same terms. Like right now, everyone's calling this a war. It's not a war. And this is not to be in support or against what's happening. I'm against it. But it was never declared war. And I think that's an important point, to not call something a war that hasn't been declared a war, because there's so many other implications with that. So that's just my thought. Something to think about as you're listening to news. And hopefully, my encouragement to anybody is, do not be stuck on any one news source, whether it's one podcast you really love or one CNN, Fox, CNBC, wherever you get your news. Don't listen to just one. I know me personally, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I get like Rogan, Dave Smith, Pierce Morgan. I get a wide variety of perspectives from those. But then I also listen to other news things on YouTube. I can't remember what the one is that I was listening to. Breakpoint, I think it is. Breaking Points, something like that. So just to get a different perspective. But listen widely and pay very close attention to the repetition of terms and what they mean and what they mean to the people saying them. Like, why are they using that term? Like a term like regime, for example. Is regime good or bad? Is war good or bad? Is that why they're using that term? That's what I'm getting at. Okay, that wraps up our news topic. Now let's get into our main topic and just look at life through an uncredible lens. And what I wanted to do today, I was genuinely struggling to come up with a topic, a main topic. And then it occurred to me that the main topic was the very thing that was causing me to struggle to come up with a main topic. And the main issue this week that I had, or the main struggle I had, was this cold. And you can hear it. I'm coughing. There may be a couple of cuts in this episode. Just so you know, if you haven't noticed already, when I built this into segments so that when I need to take a drink or cough or gather myself, blow my nose, something like that, sneeze, whatever, I've built these segments so that I can make a cut. I'm trying to do the least amount of editing that I can, but something as simple as I'm looking over, there's a window over here. I have a cat that if he's outside and I'm recording this podcast, he will come to the window and start meowing. I don't know if that gets picked up by the microphone. I think it gets cleared out when I do the editing, but it drives me nuts. And then sometimes you'll see me like staring over there, like looking at my cat being like, do not meow right now, because I can hear him through my earbuds. So it's like, but all that to say, the main topic this week is life. Life seems to ramp up at the worst times. And I wanted to talk about this because it's happened a couple times during this podcast and during this training block that I've been doing for this marathon. It's happened. It happens anyway, but it's just like when life tweaks your schedule just enough to throw you off. And for me this week, the cold was one thing, but I wanted to go through my week and just share with you all the things that happened that just kind of made it difficult, a little more difficult than I really wanted it to be. But that's what makes being uncredible. Okay. We are not, I'm not going to say I'm not, we are not. The majority of us are not elite athletes who get our fuel paid for, who have sponsors, who have advertisers for our podcast. The vast majority of us who are playing around in this space, who are doing content, have none of that. And what we do have is the unfortunate responsibility. I shouldn't say unfortunate. Especially based on my podcast feature this week, we have the privilege of throwing these things on top of our everyday lives, which are kind of hidden in the background. And part of what I'm trying to do with Uncredible as a brand is to reveal those things and say, this is, it's not the same as being an elite athlete, or like, it's not the same, but it should be credited in its own way, right? It should be rewarded, because this is the majority of us. Unsponsored, unknown, right? We don't get paid for this. We're just trying to put in the work and do this. And so like for me, it's running a marathon. For you, it might be your social media posts. It might, I don't know, whatever it is. It might be you're filming and you do film, photography, whatever it is. But we're doing this on top of life. And when you look at like people who are elite or mainstream, you don't see a lot of that life that's kind of hidden. All you see is the product. And my goal, and this is why this is the main topic, is because the main topic should be tied on some level to what's uncredible. And what's uncredible is just life. It's just life. It's not the training program. It's not the podcast. It's not my take on the news. It's everyday life. And so this week, it just seemed like I planned a 2-week taper from 20 weeks ago when I started this training plan. To give you guys an idea, I ran my half marathon in January. And for those who've been following me, the next day I didn't run after that half marathon. And then day 2, I went back to look this up. Day 2 after the half marathon, I started training for this marathon. So I went back in my Instagram and in my Strava, and literally you have my half marathon, nothing. And then 2 days later, you have day 2 marathon training, because day 1 was rest. So I've been in this training block for, really since last November. I trained for a 2-hour half marathon and I hit that in January, but that was sort of to build leg strength and really focus on this particular training block, which I planned to be pretty aggressive about it from like last November all the way till now. And for the most part, I've done that. When I look back at my stats, I've been successful at that. But all that to say, my plan for this whole time has been to do a 2-week taper, because I think one of my failure points in my last marathon back in September was that I didn't taper. I was worried about soreness that I had in my knee, and I was genuinely concerned that I wouldn't finish. I thought the pain in my knee would keep me from finishing. And so I ran like a 10-mile training run the week prior, and I caused my knee trouble, and I didn't get a solid taper. And I've been looking forward to this taper for probably 6 weeks. If you go back and look at some of my posts, you'll see that I've been having this leg pain, and I didn't want to dial it back because I wanted to get a few more long runs in. One of my fears was that if I had a few light weeks there, and like weeks like 5 or 6, 4, 5, and 6 is where I started to worry out from the marathon. If I had a light week, I would tell myself, because this is how I am, that I needed to pick it up one of these 2 weeks. And I've really been guarding these 2 weeks. And so I was looking forward to this taper for months and looking forward to the advantage it might give me when I get to the marathon. And this week rolls around. Send my wife a text message, hey, these next 2 weeks, I really need to like dial it back. I'm going to try to take it easy. I'm still going to be running, but very lightly. Really trying to communicate that I really want this to be an easy 2 weeks for me. Last Friday, right before the taper begins, was my daughter's birthday, 16th birthday, by the way. So congrats to her. And she was supposed to go to the DMV. It didn't work out that day. I think they went. They went and she failed the test. That's what it was. But she was in line for like 2 or 3 hours. It was a horrible experience. She just, it was overwhelming. So Sunday, I have that really nice run. Monday, here I am back at the DMV with my daughter. And, when I do things like the DMV, I work overnights. Monday specifically is difficult because I don't sleep that well on Sunday. So I'm usually pretty exhausted. And so we go like 2 minutes before we're about to go to the DMV, she gets sick. I mean, she gets sick. And to the point where I was like, I wasn't sure if she was nervous or genuinely sick. She starts throwing up. Sometimes, I don't know if you've been in this experience, but I've been there. My kids have been there where you throw up once and you feel better. Like maybe you ate something bad. It had to come up. You're good to go. She wasn't sure, but she couldn't say one way or the other. So I take her in. We get about two steps away from, because there's a line at the DMV. We're like 2 people away from going in to getting her test. And she's like, I can't. We go outside. She throws up again. She proceeds to throw up for like the next hour and a half, like 5 times in the next hour, to the point where I was like genuinely concerned. And it was like, okay, so I go to bed, don't get great sleep because of all that going on. The next day, we got to go to the DMV again. So we go to the DMV, yay, right? Woohoo. And she passes the test, 100, sweet, now we're good. Me, in all my genius, it was really early. It was like 9 o'clock. I'm feeling good. I got a good day's sleep the day before, and proud of her for getting that 100. And I was like, let's go drive a little bit. And she did great. Drove around a little bit, and then we hit a curb, and she freaked out and turned into this super stressful situation for her. I tried to calm her down, tried to tell her, hey, it's okay, whatever, but she was shaken up, and I felt bad. I felt terrible because here she had this 100. She kind of had that failure arc into success, and then I added a failure to it. But it's like, oops. So anyway, we got her calmed down, got her to school. She's happy at that point. But again, it turned into like not getting to bed till late. So a little bit of sleep. And then I'm like, okay, this is Tuesday. I'm like, okay, now I can coast. It's taper time. I'm going to take it easy. Wake up. No, what was it? I was starting to feel my sore throat Tuesday night, and I was like, ooh, I think I'm getting something. And I don't get sick very often. I mean, I ran all winter long, and I got sick maybe twice. And I mean, I was running in -8. I think -14 was my lowest. I think I ran 8 miles in -4, -8, something like that. I have to go back and check the temps. But didn't get sick. But here I am with a sore throat going into my taper, and I'm like, come on. And my daughter was the one who had it first, my youngest daughter. And I thought she kind of got it and got over it. So I was like, oh, maybe this will only be a day or 2. I wake up to go to work. There's another foil in this. I wake up to go to work Wednesday night. Miserable. Absolutely horrible. Just everything that you can associate with a cold. All the head stuff. Nothing in the chest, but just everything, headache, runny nose, sore throat, all the things. And add to that the fact that, of course, I had to have a team meeting that day, so I had to go in early. So not only did I have the cold, I couldn't sleep the best because I had to get up early for that. And when I go in early for these meetings, I end up staying for 10 and a half hours. So instead of an 8-hour shift, I do a 10 and a half hour shift. So do that. Come home Thursday. Didn't sleep the greatest because of the cold. Got some decent sleep, but not the greatest. And so that was Wednesday into Thursday. And then and then my son, he's trying to get his car inspected. And he has one last thing to do. Outer tie rod end front. Doesn't know how to do it. It's not a hard job, but he did his brakes on Thursday. So I told him I would jump in there and help out Friday morning so I did that 10 and a half hour shift. So now I'm going to get out early Friday. So I'm like, okay, I'll get out early Friday. I'll record the podcast, which I did not do, and then I'll work on his car. Get out Friday, not feeling the greatest, decide to just focus on the car. I have worked on my cars, my own cars, for, how old am I? 23? I'll be 23 this year. I've worked on my own cars for 23 years. Okay, I'm 43. I got married when I was 20. I mean, I go back earlier than that, probably since I was 18. So we'll say 25 years I've been working on my own cars. Never once in my life have I failed to get a tire off of a vehicle. Never once. There's been a lot of stuck bolts, difficult jobs. I've had a tie rod end job that I couldn't complete because I couldn't get the lock nut off. I've run into those situations. Never once in my life have I encountered a tire that I couldn't get off of a vehicle. And would you believe it? Here I am laying under a car, kicking it with all my might, cannot get this tire off. I mean, I hit it with a hammer. I did everything. We're going to take another attempt at it later today, but I did everything I've normally done. And then finally my son woke up because this was pretty early in the morning. So I tell my son, can you come out here? I'm like, I don't want you to think I'm full of crap. Like, take a few whacks at it. And neither one of them, we can't get this thing is seized on there big time. We're going to, like I said, we're going to take another shot at it, but I'm like, and even, this is how bad it is, right? I'm supposed to be tapering, supposed to be getting my muscles healed up. And as I'm kicking this tire with all my might, I feel my shin and my leg, the soreness that I get from when I'm running. And I'm like, I can't do this. I was like, I can't be doing this stuff right now. And so there's that. And I'm like, okay, he agrees that we're going to have to table this till today, which is Saturday. So this was yesterday, Friday. I do my normal routine. I take it easy, do a short run, watch a show, or shower, watch a show, and I'm getting ready to go to bed yesterday. In fact, I was going to go to bed early because I'm like, let's leverage the fact that I didn't have to get stuck on that job all day. Let's leverage that and get some sleep. Go up, go to the bathroom, I look out. You can't make this stuff up. I have a cat that is orange. There are like 3 of them in my community. And I look out and there's a giant dog standing over the carcass of an orange cat. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I head out there. This dog definitely killed this cat. Just scary looking dog. And long story short, this was not my cat. It's sad that it was a neighbor's cat. Wasn't my cat, but that dog continued to roam the community, and I was like nervous for my cat who was still outside. So I walked around for like 2-3 hours trying to just keep eyes on this dog and try to find this cat and help this family kind of sort out the whole situation with their cat, which was sad. But all of that to say, right? I share this whole week with you to say life ramps up at some of the worst times. Like the plan for this week is to take it easy and just cannot get a break. And I was thinking about this last night when I was thinking about putting this in the main topic. And this will make a little bit more sense when we do the podcast feature here in a moment. But I was thinking about it and I was like, does life ramp up when things like this happen? Or is life always like this and we add that pressure to it when we have an expectation? So like, would this week have been as frustrating and stressful to me if I didn't have a plan to taper? It might have been for different reasons, but would it have been what it is? Like, I'm looking at this week and all these things that happened. I got sick. That sucks, right? Like, nobody wants to be sick. My daughter struggled with her DMV test, and the first time she drove ever, we didn't go the greatest. Okay, didn't go terrible, didn't go the greatest. That cat getting killed. All those things, I guess, on their own face of it, are just normal things that happen in everyday life. But then you add to it, and this is where I get to this whole idea of being uncredible. When you add to it, when you add to everyday life something you don't get paid for, something that benefits your family, your community, or yourself, your own health, when you add those things, all those other things become that much more difficult to manage. And as you manage them, you become incredible. And that's what I was thinking about as all these things were happening, especially yesterday when I was like, it's like 1 o'clock. I usually go to bed, just to give you guys an example. As a third shifter, a night shifter, I usually go to bed around 11 or 12 in the afternoon, right? Or morning, I guess 11 to 12 is morning. That most of this week, I maybe had 6 hours of sleep, and I was getting to bed at like 1 or 2. So it's like, I put in my notes that when you look at life through an uncredible lens, life is always throwing us curveballs. We have to learn to adapt and get better with each challenge. And when I say we, I mean the majority of us. You know, there are certain luxuries that are not afforded to us that we have to overcome. And I think everybody has to overcome those at some point in life. And I think as you get better at adapting, different challenges come along. Some things become easier to handle and other things become harder. One thing I'll say, it's kind of sad, but my family has buried 3 cats, I think, in our time. Like, I would say in the last 6 years. We had 1 cat that was really old to begin with. We had another one that was unfortunately got feline leukemia and like really early. So that was like 2 years in. And we had another one that drowned in a pool. We didn't have to bury that one, but we lost that cat. And so we've been through that process. And having been through that process, when I looked out my window and saw that cat, I was like, I immediately was ready to go through the steps to take care of that situation. The person whose cat it was not. I could tell. I could just see they weren't ready to handle it. They if they have been in that situation, they weren't acting. Let's put it that way. They weren't acting like it. I went out there because if it was my cat, I had rubber gloves on. I was going to pick it up, bury it, and just didn't want my kids to have to see the cat in that condition. This person was like not sure what to do. It was unfortunate. It's a sad story, but all that to say that as we adapt to these life situations, we who are uncredible, which is most of us, right? We are that adaptation to life, in addition to all the other things we're trying to accomplish on the side. That's what makes us uncredible. And that's what the heart of this podcast is, and the whole point of this whole thing that I'm doing is to elevate those regular people who do the hard things every day in life and then add to it things that nobody ever sees. That's the uncredible, right? That's, this week of taper, I'm still going to run this marathon. There's no stopping me, right? I'm so glad that I planned a 2-week taper because of this week. Because if this week had been my taper and then I was going in Sunday, I'd be like, nah, like it would not work. So I'm thankful that I planned it this way, and who knows what next week will bring. But life, like I said, is always throwing us those curveballs. We have to learn to adapt and get better with each of those challenges. That's what makes us uncredible. All right, let's get into our podcast feature. And this podcast feature, I kind of feel really bad about because back, I'd say about 2 months ago, I put a post on Threads. I used to be really active on Threads, and then Instagram kind of took off, and it's weird. Like, Threads is weird because there's a lot of overlap between Instagram and Threads, but it's not 100%. And so, like, I'll get on Threads, and I'll be trying to remember some of the people there, and like I said, there's overlap and there's not overlap, and it's tough. But when I was using Threads, I was like, this is still something that I'm trying to mesh, but my 2 favorite platforms right now are Substack and Instagram. Those are my 2 favorite platforms to work on. I'm trying to get used to using YouTube, but I don't interact with anybody on there, so I got to get better at that. But the 2 that I love are, like, I love my interactions on Instagram. Substack, it's weird. It's hit or miss. And so I went on Threads, and I put a post up. I said, if you have a podcast and you have a Substack, I want to know about it. And maybe like 3 people were like, hey, that's me, right? And I noted these podcasts. I subscribed to them on Substack with free subscriptions. And I'll be honest, I followed them. You know what's weird? Spotify's follow system does not really help. Like, you can click follow on their system and you don't get anywhere with that. But I did discover, I think I mentioned this in last week's episode, that you can create an entire playlist of podcasts. And so one of my challenges was, even though I followed podcasts, the podcasts that I followed that were more mainstream are the only ones that pop up on my main feed. Like, even if I scroll to the very bottom, I don't really see all of the ones that I follow. And then the more I listen to the mainstream ones, the more they pop up. And so there was this weird, like, I can't get this podcast to jump up in front of me in their new episode. It just doesn't happen. And so I made it a point to go back through and find this one specifically, but there was one other one too. It might be next week's. We'll see. But this podcast is called the Midpacker Podcast. I listened to episode 116 where host Troy Meadows interviews Ryan Thrower. And I don't listen to this interview. It sounds like Ryan does some media stuff, connected somehow to Courtney DeWalter and her husband somehow, if I was listening to that correctly. But at the end of the day, these are ultra runners specifically. And this episode, like I said, I feel really bad because I had intended to make this a podcast feature months ago, and it just sort of dropped off the wayside. And then I had to dig it back up in Spotify. Got it in my list now, so it's going to be featured down the road as well. But this particular episode was kind of like, and they recognize this in the episode, it's kind of all over the place because these two guys, they just kind of had a conversation. They were just hanging out. And I have a feeling that if I do interviews, I have a couple people in mind to do interviews with, but I have a feeling my first couple interviews are going to be like this too. And I hope they know that it's not bad that they did it this way, because I've listened to some podcasts where they are very structured, and I don't think that's great. I don't think that flows very well. And I know some people need notes and things to keep them on track, but this was all over this podcast. This episode was all over the place, but you got to sit with them and hear them talk about ultra marathon running and their journey into it. Ryan talked a little bit about how he started out running like 5 or 6 miles and then heard about marathons and ultras and was like, there's more than a marathon. It was really cool. Cool is not the word. A very real description of how you get into ultra, right? Like, I feel like I'm getting there, right? I don't want to do an ultra, but then in the back of my mind, I'm going, maybe we'll see. There's one I want to try. And it's on the back burner, so to speak, because like I mentioned last week, I have a race that got canceled. Kind of makes me interested in doing this one, but I'll mention it down the road if I decide to lock it in. But they had one of the best parts about this episode was they had a great discussion on the fragility of life and how quickly it can all go away. And Ryan makes this point that when he's 80, when he's 75 or 80, he will long for the days when he ran. Like he said, imagine your worst mile in your worst ultra ever. When you're 75 or 80, you will long for that mile. And I thought that is a great perspective. You know, he talks about how quickly things can go away, and it's so true. You know, we take these things for granted that, you know, that I can go out. I've been really thinking about just this one fact as I've been tapering, how little I think of running 1 mile now that I've run a marathon. Like this taper week has been funny because I'll be a mile in and I'll feel like it was such a waste of time. So bizarre. Like I'll run 2 hours. I'll run a half marathon in 2 hours and feel really good about myself. I'll run a mile and a half and feel horrible. Feel like, man, really? A mile and a half? What is that? Like, it's such a weird thing. And listening to this episode, I was like, you know what? Just be happy that you can run a mile. Be happy you can walk a mile. And like a year ago, and about another month or two, I'll be able to say this, and then I can't anymore. A year ago, I had never run a race. And I'm going into my second marathon in a week. A year ago, I had never done this. I had run miles, but I had never done a race. I had never done really track time faster than 12-minute miles, 11, 12-minute miles. And here I am a year later trying to kind of poo-pooing a 10-minute 2-mile run. Like, why are you dogging on that? Like, a year ago, you couldn't do that. Or a year ago, you would have been impressed that you ran every single day. Now I'm trying to chase a 100-day streak just for funsies, right? Like these things that we're doing, in their case, it's an ultra marathon scene, but this stuff that we're doing, we have to be grateful for it. And I don't mean just the running. I mentioned what it means to be uncredible. I look back on this week. That's why I corrected myself earlier when I said it's unfortunate. It's not unfortunate. It is a blessing to struggle with the realities of life and be able to do other things as well. Right after this podcast, I'm going to be beating on my son's tire again, trying to get it off. It's going to suck, right? This afternoon, I'm going to be in a pool that I've been trying to put up for almost a full year now, right? I'll be adding another couple of blocks under the feet and trying to spread dirt. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that if you couldn't do those things, you would long to be able to do them. And I mentioned this a few weeks ago when I talked about the Reckless Optimist podcast as well. It's very easy to get overwhelmed with what's going on in life and get frustrated by it. We have to find ways to be grateful. And I think one way to do that is like what Ryan said in this episode of the Midpacker Podcast, episode 116. Imagine when you're 80, when you look back on these situations, how will you feel about them? Would you, when you can't get out of your chair anymore and you're attached to an oxygen tank and you're in a nursing home, you're going to long for the days that you could go out and hammer on a tire with your son. That's going to be something you long for. So we do have to be grateful. Check out the Midpacker Podcast episode. Great conversation. I'm hoping to listen to more of these episodes. One other thing I wanted to bring up that I really appreciated about this episode was they do quite a bit of talking about moseying, where some of their ultras, they just kind of take their time and take in the scenery. And I'm really hoping that I can hit my time in Buffalo of sub 4, because I want the rest of my races to take that sort of a feel. I want the rest of my races this year to be kind of moseying. Now I'm still going to be running them, but I want them to be fun and I want them to be enjoyable, and I just want to be able to take it in. After Buffalo, I have the Halfway to the Holidays Marathon, which is in, I think it's Johnstown, Ohio, which is going to be fun. People dressing up as Christmas characters in the middle of July running a marathon. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then I have the Marine Corps Marathon in October, and then the Rocky Run, which I really want to have a lot of fun with as well. So, my takeaway from this podcast was, it is a blessing every time we can lace up our shoes and head out for a run. The same is true for work and all these challenges with time and family. When we're 80, we're going to miss all of these things. And so take the time now to be grateful for them. Now let's get into our quote of the week and wrap things up. The quote this week is, it was going to be yesterday's quote. It was going to be today's quote. I literally was going to record this yesterday, which is my normal day to record, and it didn't happen between doing the car and not feeling quite right. But our quote this week is from Tony Robbins: focus on where you want to go, not on what you fear. Focus on where you want to go, not on what you fear. And I thought that was a really good, quote. I've noticed one of the things I'm working on when I run is how I, early on in a run or at certain points in a run, I think I can capture it all in 1 mile. Like, let me put it this way. I'll be at mile 7 of a marathon and think to myself, well, you're not going to make it. And you're afraid you're not going to make it. So you might as well, you start settling for a lower goal 20 miles before you're done. And so it's focus on where you want to go and not what you fear. And I think the more we deal with the things that we fear and we don't focus on those things, the more likely we are to be successful. And I really feel like I said, this last week of training, this taper, I call it training, but it's been a taper week. I really feel like I have captured something mentally that I haven't had this whole time. And it's all come from slowing down and not focusing on being afraid that I'm going to miss that time and feel like I failed somehow. And I think yes, my focus, my goal, so to speak, is that time. But what I want to be able to do is finish this marathon and have a good time. That's what I want to do. And I don't just say that like everybody says that. I do want to hit that goal, and I'm going to chase that goal. But I also want to have fun. And I want to be able to be controlled, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast. I want to walk out of that marathon confident and strong physically. I don't want to walk out dead and beat. So if I don't hit the time, but I build on future marathons, I'm good with that. So I'm not sure what your fear is, but focus on where you want to go and not what you're afraid of. And chase it. You know, you might be afraid of getting hurt if you run or you lift weights or something like that. You can't be afraid of that. You might be afraid of getting made fun of, something you want, like an endeavor you want to chase, like for example, this podcast. You might be afraid someone's going to find it and make fun of you. Don't focus on your fear. Focus on where you want to go. And yeah, so let's close things out. As always, thanks for listening to the Uncredible Podcast. Remember to subscribe to the Substack at uncredible.me. You might be listening to this on YouTube, Spotify. I recommend you download Substack app, sign up for the email newsletter. You can, listen, I don't care. You can sign up subscribe to it and just have it dumped into your spam or whatever. I don't care. Subscribe to it so that you get the notifications on the Substack app, because on the Substack app, you'll be able to get these posts, listen to the articles that I write, click on the link to go to YouTube, click on the links. Like when the show notes come out, the link to the episode is in the show notes and all the other stuff. So like if you're listening to this on Spotify, technically you could jump down and click on the Midpacker Podcast and go there. But in the Substack, you would have an email or a post where you could just have that stuff right in front of you and click on what you want. So check those things out. If you do listen on YouTube and Spotify and those are your formats, great. Go ahead, subscribe, like the episodes, do that, share them. That helps. But yeah, for Uncredible merch, I'm wearing, this is still my favorite shirt. I don't think this is the one I wore last week. I hope not. This is my favorite shirt. Came out the best. But I have all kinds of merch on uncredible.me. It's merch.uncredible.me. These are Redbubble shirts. I get 10% of whatever you pay. There's usually crazy discounts on there too. So, but in fairness, the prices are inflated. Get a discount. Trust me. But the stuff's quality. I've had nothing but success with the active athletic shirts. They're a little pricier, but this is, I was going to say a year. It's not quite a year old, this. But I have 3 shirts like this that I had made at the same time, and none of them are cracking or wearing. I have some cotton shirts I've gotten that are fading a little bit. So I would say that that's probably the only downside, but they're the cheaper shirts. So I guess you get what you pay for. But if you want to support the podcast or subscribe, if you want to support the Substack or the Uncredible stuff, I'm leaving that in. I don't care. Grab some stuff from merch.uncredible.me. If you're interested in the daily grind, go to Instagram at Jeremy Lundmark, or again, if you have the Substack app, you'll get those posts as well. So I post pretty much everything I post on Instagram, I'm posting on the Substack. And the idea with the Substack is that if you want all of the content, you'll get it there. I was a little bit inconsistent early on with the notes with Substack, but I'm trying to be like, if I post it on Instagram, I immediately post it on Substack as well, so that all the content is there. So again, thanks for watching and listening, and remember, stay uncredible.